the biggest problem with our area, right, our area of analytics is it's a skill set where the pace of progress is so fast that if you're not in it every single day, you slowly start seeing everybody going past you, right? Everything changes so fast.
This episode is brought to you by Green Skies Analytics, an audit analytics service provider that works with internal audit departments that have data analysts and are still frustrated with trying to make analytics actually work, aren't getting the expected ROI, who can't break through the communication barrier between the analysts and the audit team, and those that need experienced direction for an audit analytics strategy and process. Those that feel like they've wasted time and money on trainings, aren't getting the value they want, not prioritizing the highest risk areas for the organizations, or have projects that seemingly never get completed. Do you deal with any of that? If you do, go to the show notes of this episode and click the Green Skies Analytics link, or go to greenskiesanalytics.com to schedule a call and understand how Green Skies Analytics makes analytics actually work for internal audit.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Audit Podcast. I'm your host, Trent Russell. Today on the show, we have Ishan Kunkur on the show. He is a former data analytics consultant at Deloitte and is currently the digital analytics program manager at Delta Airlines. Given Ishan's role in analytics within the internal audit department at Delta, that's most of what the conversation is about, probably through no surprise. A couple of things that we hit on, though, is how they integrated analytics at Delta into the audit planning and execution phase. So we always talk about risk assessment overall, and then planning, controls testing, or execution or fieldwork, and then reporting. And so we're talking planning and execution here and what they're doing relative to that. And then we really just kind of go on this 4-year journey with Ishan and the data analytics team for the internal audit group at Delta. And so like year one, walk us through what was it like? What were the initiatives? What'd you get done? Year two, year three, etc. And so some of the things that we talked through within that journey, that 4-year journey, or going into the 4th year, is the products that were created, what they're doing with SOX relative to automation and analytics, increasing data literacy across the team, creating a connected risk platform within their organization using their audit management system and their GRC product, internal audit AI use cases that they're thinking through and working through as well. And then lastly, we haven't really talked about blockchain in a really long time. I feel like it was like maybe 2020 is the last time we talked about blockchain on the show. And that's largely because we try to stick to what we feel like the audience needs to know relative to trends, risks, etc. And it just kind of seems like with AI taking off, really haven't heard a ton about blockchain. Just so happens, blockchain is a kind of a hobby and a passion project of Ishan's. And so we did want to give him the chance to talk about that and kind of give us an update. What's been going on with blockchain? Why have we not heard about it? Is it still out there outside of the crypto world? Is anybody actually using it? Things of that nature. All right, last thing. Ishan mentions a couple of tools. He mentions Copilot. He mentions Cursor, ChatGPT. So just to be clear, he only uses Copilot for his Delta internal audit analytics projects. Cursor, everything else that we've mentioned, those are only used for his personal projects relative to research on blockchain and other hobbies and interests that he has. All right, here we go. As of late, and this can be like a personal thing or example, or it could be professional or whatever, you want it to be, but kind of like we're trying to help people with use cases with ChatGPT, Claude, Llama, whatever, Gemini, whatever it is that they're using. So what have you used, let's just say ChatGPT for as of late? Do you have any unique use cases or anything that you could share?
Absolutely. So I primarily use ChatGPT as a idea generation partner, right? So that is the platform where I go, where I bounce my ideas off of it. I have not used it for any kind of reporting as such, but for all of my projects, both work related and non-work related, that I work on the weekends for, I use ChatGPT to curate those ideas and to finalize those ideas, right? When we come to the programmatic side of it, ChatGPT has this tendency to start hallucinating after a certain number of prompts back and forth. So when it comes to programming, I use Cursor, which directly integrates with my IDE. So I use that a lot for my programming assistance, but um, ChatGPT is primarily an area where I go to generate ideas and finalize them.
Got it. And then for those that aren't familiar with, there's two terms there. One, hallucinations. I think most people are at this point, but hit on that, what those are. And then you mentioned cursor. So a little bit more detail on that, I think.
Sure. So let's start with hallucinations. So what happens is, because ChatGPT responds to you in a context, sometimes it can start responding out of context, or it can start forgetting what the context was. So let's say you're having a conversation and you have told it to, hey, remember this when we go to the next level, remember this. Sometimes it will stop and not remember it at all. Another instance that I've lately observed is it will randomly stop generating outputs, and then you have to go and say, hey, are you there? And then it'll wake up and it'll be like, yeah, I'm here, let's continue our conversations.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
So that is the hallucination part of it. And it is extremely important when it comes to hallucination, especially when people start using ChatGPT for coding purposes. Because it's a token generation, not everything that comes out is 100% accurate. So when we take the logic, when we take the ideas from there and move it to an actual workflow, we have to make sure that the output from the LLM matches what our requirement was. So all of that is a part of the same broader concept of hallucination.
So hallucinations, let's hallucination, basically it's not going to get it right 100% of the time, because all it's doing is basically, and you mentioned tokens, is predicting what it thinks the next word should be, and it's still making a prediction, and no prediction of the future basically is going to be 100% accurate. And so those tend to get wrong, which is why it's referred to as hallucination risk, especially within our circle. That's why you can't just go, hey, do XYZ for me, and then copy paste and send it out. There's still the need for a review.
100%.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, 100%. And then Cursor, this is something that I started playing with about 2 weeks ago. So I'm very new to it, but the difference here is Cursor is meant for coding. So it's LLM for coding. ChatGPT is good for conversations, idea generations. It is good for you to have your baseline figured out. But when it comes time to move the idea, especially in analytics, right? Especially if you're doing something in, let's say, Python, and you had an idea, you refine it in ChatGPT, and once all of the PRDs are set, um, it is then you take those PRDs and then you move it to Cursor, and then there, it's, from my 2 weeks worth of experience, a much better coding experience
Okay.
than ChatGPT.
Got it. All right.
Both of them serve extremely different purposes and should be used together. That's what I have experienced so far.
Okay. ChatGPT, very generalized, knowledge base. Cursor, very specific. We want
Correct.
to code. That's where we go to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And I think we're going to get to this. And I feel like now that I'm thinking about it, we're almost answering a few questions in advance and getting the answer, maybe getting ahead of ourselves. So let's start with the end in mind is the way I'm thinking about it. Talk us through how you have analytics embedded or integrated into your audit process, whether that's audit, the planning or controls testing is usually where we tend to hang out the most. Reporting's great. There's a lot of AI use cases with that, but analytics specifically, what does that look like for y'all?
Yes. So it has been a journey for us. We are a small team. So it's me, my colleague Elijah Black, and my manager Valerie Williams. Um, we are a small team, and the way we work is we support audit, we support ERM as a function, and we support SOX as well. So when we started off just supporting the core audit function. And what that meant was performing analytics for audits during the entire audit cycle for the given audit. We then evolved to a position where we wanted the auditors, the core auditors, to have a base level analytics experience. And what that meant was we provided upskilling to them in terms of how to use Excel, Power Query, and Power BI at an intermediate and at an advanced level. And what that did was over time, it allowed us to have more time on our hands to start doing other initiatives. And by other initiatives, I am talking about SOX automation. I'm talking about dashboarding for our GRC tool. I'm also talking about what we are planning for this year in terms of scratching the surface on seeing how far we can go in terms of using ML, that is machine learning. Um, so it has been a wonderful journey, and one thing that I'm extremely grateful for is the leadership at Delta has given us the freedom in terms of exploration, right? There are there's a very small amount of limitation in terms of what we cannot do in terms of technology, right? Of course, there are enterprise-wide limitations, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what a team says can or cannot be used, right? Um, so what that has done is that it has allowed us to upskill ourselves as well, right? So when I started 3 years ago and where I am right now, my skill set in Python is drastically different because of the amount of freedom that I was given to play around with it and figure it out, right? Having said that, um, audit planning is a different beast altogether. So, what I spoke about was audit analytics, right? But audit planning is a topic that we are going to be executing at the end of this year. So data driven audit planning, right? That is the end goal. Well, I don't know if it is the end goal, but it is one of the goals that we have for this year.
Let me to clarify real quick, because we say audit planning, and I realize this is probably my fault for setting it up this way. Audit planning, as in we're going to use data to some degree to determine what audits we're going to do, or we already know what audits we're going to do. We're going to do analytics within the planning phase of the given audit.
The former. What I spoke until now was for the latter.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, in order for us to have a successful data driven audit plan, right? So we are in 25. In 26, if we are supposed to have a successful data driven audit plan, what that would mean is that we need to have a rich historical database that we can use in terms of risk assessments, risk evaluations, extractions from previous audits, so on and so forth, to fuel the audit plan. And what that means, and going back to what we were talking about in terms of GRC, right? This year is the year when we want to lay the foundation of our GRC platform so that we are able to do data-driven audit planning for 2026. Um, what that means is a lot of back-end configurations and making sure that the platform itself is mapped out accurately so that when the time comes and when we start thinking about how to do it, data itself is not a limitation. So the initial part of this year and towards Q3 will all be focused on making sure that come Q4, data won't be a limitation in terms of what we need to do for data-driven audit planning.
Okay. When you guys were, you said it was set up to where initially you would kind of go in and you would do analytics for any given audit. Is there an example that sticks out in your head? Because even then, I feel like there's still some people that need like a concrete example. Is there anything, and if there's anything too sensitive, like we can just skip over this, but is there any example where you're like, oh, you know what? That thing that we built was pretty cool.
Um, there are quite a few that come to my mind. I can't go into the details, but at a very high level, I can say that there was this one project where we were working of a contract, right? So at a without going into details, what we did was we took the contract, converted that into business logic
Mm-hmm.
completely in Python, and we were able to run the entirety of the population against the said business rules.
Got
So
it.
instead of doing sampling and hoping that you find something, we were able to run the entirety. There were a lot of lessons learned, without a doubt, even during that process, because that was the first time we did it as well. Um, but that was pretty cool that we were able to achieve um, around 85 to 90% of the total population's testing in one go. So what would have taken weeks and months was achieved in uh, 1 or 2 weeks, I think.
Okay. Okay. So we've hit on what I think you've been at Delta 4 years now. Is that right? You're going into year
A,
4?
a little over 3 years, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so we've hit on some of this, but what I was really curious about is the kind of the analytics journey, because it sounds like you've been there from the beginning or the very early stages. So
Mhm.
can you walk us through it? If it's in a year 1, 2, 3, something like that, that's fine. If not, it's fine also. But kind of walk us through the steps that were taken to ultimately get to where you are. I feel like there's a lot of teams that feel like they're constantly behind when it comes to analytics. So I was just curious if you could share with the audience and go like, hey, this is where we are, and these are the projects we took on to begin with, or the initiatives we took on to begin with, and how they came out, or to whatever detail again that you want to get into. But kind of walk us through the history of audit analytics at Delta, maybe if we put it like that.
Let me go all the way to year zero. Let's call it year zero, right? When we started with the program. Um, Year zero started with the basic conceptualization of dashboarding, right? What is dashboarding? Um, we implemented a few dashboards for a few business use cases. From there, the value was observed, and then we moved into the audit analytics for the planning phase of all of the audits, right? And what that meant was our team was embedded into the audit cycle, and it was on us to perform all of the analytics. So our team would sit down with the core audit team and come up with a test plan, and then our team would go and execute on the test plan. The next step from there was when we started upskilling our core auditors, right? And what that meant was we would still do the same planning together, but if it was under the purview of the auditors to be able to do the testing with the knowledge that they had gained from the upskilling process, they would do it. But that did not by any ways means that we were not involved. So what that meant was, if we are talking about big data, if we are talking about complex logic, if we're talking about data in terms of volume where Excel cannot handle it or Power BI cannot handle it, that is when our team came in, right? And that is how we are operating right now. So while all of this was going on, we started taking on additional responsibilities in terms of thinking about what else we can do, where else we can provide value in terms of not only just doing audit enablement, but also providing a higher value to the enterprise as well. And that is when we stepped into the world of SOX automation. So last year, we did around 45 SOX control testing automations, which saved around 360 hours for the year. And they were on the control testing side, right? We did that. We also started creating dashboards for our ERM partners in our GRC tool. Some of the dashboards were consumed by the leaders, some were by the owners. But we started expanding. So we started with audit enablement, then we moved into SOX automation, then we also started enabling ERM as a functional unit. And this year, we are trying to connect ERM, SOX, and audit to provide a unified view of risk across the enterprise. Um, and that a big portion of us being able to achieve that would be getting a GRC in the right place, right? Once that is all said and done, it'll open up avenues in terms of building out KRIs, KPIs within the GRC platform to keep it centralized in a location, and that is where we want to go. So real time KRI implementation is something that we will want to launch in the near future. Um, the same goes for KPIs. We are also, like I previously mentioned, starting this year, we are also starting to see which areas we can use as proof of concept to see if we can deploy ML. And in our case, most of it will be unsupervised machine learning. We will not have the luxury of working with labeled data. So it will be most of the times, at least the way I see it, it will be outlier detection in the fraud space and so on and so forth. Um, but that is not something that we have written down and have committed to yet. It is just something that we are exploring. So it is always going to be an evolving journey, right? And then depending on how the enterprise evolves with the world in the world of AI, we will also start exploring how we can start leveraging AI in our GRC too. So right now we have access to Copilot, right? All of the auditors have access to Copilot and they can use it. But how can we start using AI to derive insights from our GRC platform, right? That is going to be the next step in the realm of AI for us. So it, like I said, it has been an interesting journey and it'll constantly keep on evolving year after year in terms of how much value we can extract from a given initiative.
There is a ton that I have that I feel like part of my job is to, like, when a guest says something, I feel like almost my ears start burning as if the listeners are hearing it and then going, "Hey man, ask him about that. We want to know more about that thing." So there's a few of those that you mentioned that I want to hit on. Because a lot of these initiatives that you mentioned that you guys have had success with, a lot of other folks have not. And so I'm going to start with, let's just call it data literacy. You referred to it as upskilling, whatever, it's all the same. So if we, I guess for the sake of the show, the timing of it and not making this, like a 4 hour just show, if we did like an 80-20. So if you said, hey, this is the one, two things that I would recommend as far as upskilling your non-technical or non data literate auditors. I think you refer to them as the core audit team. If there's like 1 to 2 things of everything that you all tried, probably online training, hands-on stuff. Here's a use case. Try this. We're going to sit with you and hold your hand while you do this. Now go Google this, whatever it was. What's the 1 or 2 things you would go, if I went to another organization and they said, upskill the auditors, but we're only going to give you a little bit of time to really make that work. What would you tell them? Say, do this and do this, and it won't be perfect, but you'll get a ton of value from it.
So it was a learning curve for us also in terms of what we learned and how we thought it would have worked better. So I'm going to give you the best case answer, right? Um, in my opinion, the best case or the best way to approach this particular um, instance that we're talking about in terms of upskilling is one, to actually have a hands on, in person session, right? You can break it down into multiple sessions if the topic is extremely heavy. So, for example, when we were doing the Power Query training, I think it was broken down over 2 or 3 weeks. So every week we would sit down with the audit team, go through the class, have them execute what we were trying to teach them in person, and then follow up the next week with a quick recap and then introduction of new topics and then move on from there, right? But here is the thing. Once you do that, the biggest problem with our area, right, our area of analytics is it's a skill set where the pace of progress is so fast that if you're not in it every single day, you slowly start seeing everybody going past you, right?
Exactly.
Everything changes so fast. So training the auditors in person is a fantastic first step. Having said that, it is equally important to give them the opportunity to upskill on their own. So the first step is to give them a taste of what it is that we are trying to ask from them. The second step is to give them the freedom to explore what they want to do, knowing what they have done, right? And another thing that I found out, and my team also found out last year, is that there are so many solutions out there, right? There are coding solutions, there are no code solutions, there are low code solutions. So many solutions out there. For majority of the work, or going back to your ratio, for 70% of the work, right? Excel, Power Query, Power BI. If the auditors know the basics of these, for a significant workload, they can utilize these tools to achieve what they want to achieve. Anything beyond that, that is where we step in, because those tools are not designed for that purpose anyway. So you can't pick a tool and force it to do something that it is not designed to do. So again, going back and summarizing everything, step one, in person, split over a couple of weeks. Step two, um, give them curated lessons that they can take online at their own pace to keep up with what is going on in the analytics world. And step three, don't don't go crazy with the amount of solutions and tools that are out there. Keep it basic, because once they understand the basic, they can leverage that knowledge across any other platform. But the basic has to be strong.
Yeah, and that's what we preach to. Similarly, is if you can join data together, or think VLOOKUP, index match if you're in Excel. If you can summarize it, i.e., pivot table in Excel, and then the rest is basically just using the internet or an LLM, ChatGPT, whatever, to figure out the specific functions you need to use to clean a column or whatever it is. But those are the three things. If you know how to do that, the tool doesn't matter. Like every tool does all of those things, and it's the foundational elements, regardless of the tool that you're in. Just know how to do those, and you'll be able. Yeah, maybe you're not doing machine learning or predictive, or you mentioned unsupervised or something to that effect, but it's going to cover a lot for core auditors, as you refer to them, and just being able to know how to do those three things is really great. All right. Well, the other thing that I felt like people were just like, dude, you got to ask him. You got to ask him more about this. SOX automation, and you said what 360 hours I think you're able to shave off in the year. What did that look like? And are we talking testing when we talk automation? We say automation like, hey, we were able to test 100% of this population, and that saved us X amount of time, or was it some kind of automation process where, hey, we know the samples that we need to go take, and we have some solution that goes out and pulls down all 60 invoices, or whatever the case may be, and maybe an example or two here, to the extent you can speak to it, would be helpful also.
Yeah. So I think it's a combination. Um, I will say majority of the 45 solutions that we developed last year were more along the lines of not automating the control itself, but rather automating the testing of the control. And that ranged across a spectrum, right? That ranged across the spectrum in terms of, it was something as simple as just comparing a few files with a few fields to make sure that everything is matching accordingly, all the way to complex logic implementation in terms of, hey, there are these 10 files. I have to extract this information from this information from this file, aggregate them, make sure that the aggregate value matches to some other value, along those lines. What we want to move to, though, this year um, is trying to see if we can automate the control itself. And let me also tell you that learning which control to automate was not an easy task. It was such a humongous lift, not only from our team, but from our partners, from the SOX team, in just identifying what kind of control can be automated or has the potential to be automated. There are multiple calls, back and forths, and decisions to be taken around what is the ROI on automating it. And sometimes we got it right, sometimes we did not. But it's a part of the learning process. It's a part of getting to a point where you understand, oh, if I do this, this will work. And if I do this, this will not work. I know that from a fact from my previous experience.
So unrelated, and one reason I really wanted to ask you about this is because you just mentioned it as a hobby when we were talking earlier. And so this isn't, you're not on the blockchain team or looking to implement it or audit it necessarily, as far as I recall. But it's just something you go, yeah, on the weekends, I really enjoy doing this. And
Mhm.
so it's
Yeah.
a hobby of mine, which is where you tend to get a lot of I think the best answers for people that are especially passionate about something. So blockchain is something, it seems like AI showed up and blockchain just kind of like walked walked out of the door and everybody stopped talking about it. So is it still around? Like if you gave us a, hey, it's 2025, this is what's going on in blockchain. What's the status of it? Where are we at with blockchain? And maybe to the extent that you want to, what's your interest in it? Why does it tickle your brain and make your brain happy as a
Yeah,
hobby?
yeah, absolutely. Let me first start by saying that this is totally personal. So nothing here overlaps with my work at all. This
Got it.
is Saturday and Sunday and the days that I have off, right?
Yeah.
Um, so let's tackle your questions. I heard a few of them there. So we'll go one by one. Um, the first, trying to address your first question in sequence. Um, it's all about hype and maturity cycles, right? So the hype around blockchain was back in 2017, right? Um, and that was because of a lot of factors. It was a new tech, it was emerging technology, everybody was, into it. Um, but then the crash happened, and everybody started, we are not sure a little bit about this, we don't know what is going on. But there is, to any tech event, there is the thing that you see in the media, and then there is a reality behind it. So in 2017 to 2022, I will say that was a hype cycle for blockchain. But now, I blockchain has entered its maturity cycle. So when we look at all the regulations that are coming out of the government, when we look at all of the institutional adoption that is coming out of major institutions, that is where we are seeing that companies are actually finding real life use cases for blockchain, right? And going back to the integration with AI, if you really, really think about it, AI to be successful requires blockchain. And the reason why I say that is because AI at its core is dependent upon data with a high level of integrity. And blockchain at its core is a immutable general ledger. And what that does is it empowers the models to work off of data that is, one, public, anybody can see it, right? It is verifiable, and it is distributed. So the another concern with AI is, the the problem that some people are pointing out around centralization of AI. So blockchain not only assists with that, it not only makes it decentralized, but it also makes it um, public. So anybody can see it and query it and so on and so forth. Um, the reason why I got into blockchain back then was, back then when I was doing a lot of work around fraud, um, and I was looking at technologies that would help mitigate fraud going forward, blockchain had popped up, right? And at that point, it was more around crypto. So cryptos and blockchains are two different things, right? It was more around cryptos. That was the entry point. But then as I spent more time on it over the weekends, over the months, over the years, I have realized that there is much more to it. So now there are projects that are building on top of blockchain that are integrating AI and creating agentic AIs that are now helping generate end-to-end workflows for enterprises. All of this is in its infancy stage, as AI is as well. Um, but there is a huge amount of synergy between what blockchain has to offer and what AI needs in terms of data requirements.
What's the you mentioned there's real world use cases. Companies are actually using it. Are there a handful of those you could speak to?
It is now integrated into wine. So not so wine and hard liquors, because there are some categories of hard liquors which age really well and who increase their value as well with time goes. So with blockchain, you establish an immutable trace of the origin, the amount of years that has passed since then, up to the point you open the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
And the same is true for salmon, right? It's it is farm to table on the technology. It's that is what it is at its core.
All right. Well, I appreciate the blockchain update. Again, I haven't heard really blockchain mentioned outside of crypto and Bitcoin in it seems like years. And so when you did mention that, I was like, yeah, we should probably see what's going on there. So it is still alive. That's interesting to hear. Good to know. But with that said, what else? What do you have? What do you want to leave the audience with? I will leave it to you.
Absolutely. And this may help other people who are in my position as well within the industry. But when we think about career progression in today's world, right? I've been giving it a lot of thought since last year, before AI was a thing, right? So I went through ups and downs of what I want to do with my career, and then AI came in, and then I had to completely reevaluate what I want to do, what can be done, what are the possibilities. What I want to let people know that I think it's okay to have these questions, but it is extremely important for you to have a support system, right? In terms of good managers, good leadership that you can talk to. We have been extremely lucky because we have that support system. In in case you if you're looking for it, the support system can come from a lot of places: friends, acquaintances, people that you may not know, but your friends may know. So, where I'm going with it is, if you're confused about what AI is going to do, I just want to leave the audience with this simple fact that as long as you learn to evolve with AI, you should be fine. And as long as you continue to seek the guidance of people who have more wisdom and knowledge than you in terms of where you should be going next, it'll only add to the next chapter of your life. And that's all I have to say, because I've been hearing so many um, concerns that people have when it comes to AI and what it means for them. That having gone through the last few months, I have realized that it is an enabler, it's a productivity booster, and that is how you're supposed to look at it. It is nothing more, nothing less. At the end of the cycle, it will be an additional tool under your belt. And the faster you prepare for that, the better position you will be.
Hey everyone, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Audit Podcast. Whatever platform you're listening on right now, I'm sure there's a subscribe button somewhere, so please hit the subscribe button there. If you're listening through iTunes or Spotify, feel free to go give us that 5-star rating. It only took me about 16 seconds to give myself a 5-star review, and it really helps to get future guests to come on the show, so we'd really appreciate that. Lastly, be sure to check out the show notes and follow us on all our social media channels on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on TikTok. Also, if interested, please sign up for our weekly newsletter from the Audit Podcast. Thank you all. Have a great one.